welcome to this stream. I'm Jasmine Greenaway. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft. I'm coming about my third year at Microsoft. That'll be in August. So thank you so much for joining this stream. Today I'll be working on some chatbots today, and showing you a few chatbots. And I'm just gonna turn my sound here off so that I can also watch the stream here. So if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. And yeah, so we'll just get started, and yeah, just drop any questions that you may have. Okay, so with chatbots, essentially, let's just back up a bit to the definition of a bot. A bot is essentially a application, a web app, a modern web app, and it does specific tasks to help you and your business or your company or whatever that you're trying to do. It has specific tasks that are done that you tell it to do. So with a chatbot, you communicate these tasks via a text or voice. So that's what essentially a chatbot is. Me personally, I have been using the internet for a considerable amount of time now. I remember back in the days of dial-up, when I used AOL, America Online. For those of you who might not know, it was pretty much this dial-up platform that had chat integrated into it and things like that. So one of these part of AOL was this instant messaging thing called AIM, or AOL Instant Messenger. And on AOL you had this chatbot called Smarter Child. It's called Smarter Child, and you could communicate with it, and it was a fun experience. Another bot that I can recall is Clippy, and Clippy was that little paper clip that would help you with your document that you were working on. So that's kind of been my first foray into chatbots. But now we have bots. We have Twitter bots. We have Alexas and Siris and Cortanas and things like that. So it only makes sense that we should be able to have the power, or not even essentially power, but the tools at hand to be able to build this ourselves. And that is where the bot framework comes in. So the bot framework and the Azure Bot Service is a set of tools and services that allow you to build your bot, test your bot, and also deploy your bot to various things called channels. So this could be in Teams, this could be in your own whatever chat client that you might have built. So it's really up to you on where you want to place it. But with the bot framework, you have a number of tools and things to help you build it locally and also deploy it. So today I'll be walking through some two bot demos. One will be probably one of the first bots I built in JavaScript. It's a simple bot that I used for introduction to chatbots talk that I did. So I'll walk through that, and then we'll go into a deeper demo with some language understanding with this service called Lewis. And I'll talk more in detail about that a little later. Okay, so again, if any of this is of interest to you, you can actually go to the Microsoft Docs and check out the Azure Bot Service. This is just the overview page, just kind of giving you a overview of what an overview of what it is. And so through here you can find some tutorials and samples and things like that. Now, the bot framework is I'm going to be using the bot framework in JavaScript. With the bot framework you can use either JavaScript, C# or Python to build it. And if you are not comfortable with either of those languages, or you prefer a little bit more of a visual way to build your bot, you can actually use the Bot Framework Composer. You just pretty much download it, and there's some quick starts and tutorials to help you get through that. So the things that I'm going to be showing today, you can also do with the Composer. So let's go on to our first bot here. So I'm going to swap my desktop here, and I'm going to go to my code. So what I have here is a few some references to a few packages, node packages. One that I want to mention here specifically is this one called the Bot Builder. So this is the Bot Framework SDK for Node. The Bot Framework, one thing to keep in mind is that the Bot Framework, the docs are on, the most recent version is version 2, and the docs have documentation or information for version 3 and 4. I'm sorry, I think I might have said version 2, but I meant version 4. The most recent is version 4, and there also is documentation for version 3. And what I'll be working through today is in version 4. So this bot is a simple bot that I got from the Azure Samples repo for the Bot Framework, and I kind of worked on from there. So you'll probably see some comments in here that might not seem they fit here in my code. So just keep that in mind that I built this on top of samples. I'm sure that you all are probably familiar with this of just taking a sample or taking some example code and then building on top of it. So that's what I'm doing here. So the sample that I took was one called the Echo Bot, and what that essentially did for the sample was just pretty much repeat what you were saying in the chat window. So in my example here, I've built on it so that when you send a message, the bot actually prompts you for a few things, your name and a message, and I'll show you exactly where that happens in this part of the code here. And then when you get that message and when you send the message to the bot, then it will send it to an HTTP endpoint, which is all the way at the bottom here in my send response function here. And so what that does, it'll send it to an endpoint that I have that will trigger a logic app, an Azure logic app that I'll show you in a second here, and it'll put it in a Azure queue. The queue is just a set of messages that I can just pop off of the stack. And so those messages, I have had them show up in a little browser extension, a little local browser extension I built on my browser that we looked at just a second ago, and that's it. So I'll send a message to my bot, and then that message will show up in my browser extension. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to run this right here. Okay, and so now I know that my bot is ready to go. And all right, so now I am connected to the Bot Framework emulator, and this is just one of the ways that you can test out your bot. I could actually also, if I wanted to, I could actually debug my code in VS Code and step through the different lines of my code while my bot is working. So I'm gonna just restart my conversation here, and it starts off with hello and welcome to this bot, and it goes in and it's like, what is your name? So I'm gonna put my name in here. And then what is your message? And I'll say, hello, Twitch. Great. Okay. So now it's responded and said, thank you for my message. So now let's see our message in the browser extension. Okay, so this is an old message from some old testing. So let's just keep on refreshing. And there we go. There's my message that says hello, hello Twitch. Great. So let's step through a little bit of what I just did. So this is pretty much what this is pretty much the part of the code that runs when I open my chatbot. So hello and welcome to this bot. Let's get started. What is your name? So on members added essentially means it's just listening. My bot's just listening for when somebody is trying to get or entering the chat. So it's just a welcome text. Now, this line here where it says fill out user profile, this is the function that is that controls the conversation at this point. And this is the function that actually grabs the information, my name, and the message that I want to send. And here we can see that first step here is asking what is my name? What is your name? And the second question is what is your message? And the way that this works is that there is this object called that I've named as flow, and this is a conversation flow object. And so what it does, it'll keep tally or keep a log of the history of my conversation. And one of those properties is last question asked. And this is what I use to continue the conversation in the chat. So if the last question asked was none, I'm going to assume right here in line 68, and I'll just zoom in here. I'm going to assume that if the last question asked was none, I'm going to assume that I haven't asked your name yet. So then once I get that, then I go on to the next part here. So if the last question asked was your name, then I go and ask what is your message. Then I get that message, and then once I have that message, or once you've answered my question to your message or to the message, then I will say thank you for your message, and then I go to send responses. Actually, I send the response to the endpoint first, then I say thank you for your message. And then it goes here to my logic app. So let me show you exactly what that looks like in the logic app, and we'll come back to the code in a second here. So here my dashboard. By the way, I love putting animated GIFs on my dashboard. You can do it yourself too. So if you like using the portal a lot and you are staring at it a lot and you want a pretty image, you just add a new markdown thing. I don't know what you call it, markdown square. And you would just put whatever that image is in that markdown code, and then you have a GIF. Anyway, let's move on to that logic app. So a logic app is one of Azure's serverless offerings where you have something called a trigger, and this is what starts my logic app or starts the code. It's pretty much event-driven code. So my event here is that I sent a request or a post request to an endpoint. So if I open my designer here, this is the endpoint, and this is the JSON schema that I am sending to my endpoint. And then I just put it in my little queue here, and the queue here is what is, and the queue message is what is showing up. Is showing up in here. Great. So that's pretty much it for this logic app. But you could continue on with it and do a little bit more if you wanted. And if you actually, and I actually have, I'll share it at the end, but I actually have a repo with this basic bot where it creates a logic app for you with an endpoint, with the endpoint trigger, and then you can go ahead and add more to your logic app. So it doesn't have to just, send something to a queue. You could do more to it. You could have it send text messages or something like that. It's really up to you. So going back to our code here. So the logic for the conversation, which we call in the bot framework the dialogue, it all is happening here. And then in this index.js file, this is just a lot of just configuration stuff that we use to set up. So for example, the bot, I need to get the reference the bot here and set up the port, all that, and things like that. So this is normally how you'll see in a lot of these bot framework samples. You'll see this kind of separation. You'll see this index.js file that kind of has like all this configuration stuff, and then the bot.js file. And usually in the samples they'll like name bot some blah 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 bot main bot or something like that. Here is where you would actually have things like conversations and messages. Okay, so just looking at here and seeing, just looking at the chat here. Oh, hi, great to see you streaming. Oh, thank you. Awesome, sweet. Thanks for having me. Awesome, okay, cool. So that is one bot. And let's go on to something a little bit more in detail called Lewis. So the bot framework is part of cognitive services, and cognitive services has a bunch of other things like sentiment analysis, and also Lewis, or also called language understanding. And language understanding really is part of the idea or the pillar of natural language processing. So when you and somebody else are having a conversation, things like context is important. So when someone says good morning, how are you, you probably say good morning back, I'm well, how are you? And normally that's how it goes. But that context might be different between different languages, or between the different situations. So for example, if I am entering a conversation with maybe somebody from customer service, they will probably say something like, hello, how are you? How may I help you? And normally I would probably say something like, I'm doing well, here's my problem. So with Lewis and natural language processing, this is a way for us to mimic, or not even mimic, but emulate that type of conversation going back and forth. So this is what Lewis is for. So in this example here, in this the Lewis homepage, there's just a few just examples of what the user could say, also known as utterances, and this is what the things that Lewis would return. So if someone said order pizza, then their intent is that they want food. They want to order some food. And there's some scoring that goes into those intents, and then those intents might be linked to some sort of entity. And the way that I like to think of intents and entities is kind of like intents are what the user intends to do, or the verb of the conversation, and then the entities are going to be the noun, what the user wants, what the user needs, what is the user trying to attain, the whatever thing that is. So that I essentially would call that the noun. So let's look at Lewis inside of when you've logged in. So with Lewis, you want to train this model so that it understands the intents that you expect the user to be looking for. So, okay, so let's look at this learning one here. So the next bot I'm going to show you is going to use Lewis, and this chatbot here, it sends some, it'll send you either samples or docs based on what you ask for. So in Lewis, I have trained a model to understand some certain texts or utterances that the user might send to say that they intend to learn something. So if someone says something like, I want to learn about, I know that their intent is to learn. So if they're saying, you know, I want samples or I want documentation, doesn't matter if they want samples or documentation, either way, their intent is to learn, and their intent is to get some docs or links from the bot. So then the next step here is the entities. So the entities are like I said, the nouns, the representation of what you're looking for. And the other thing about entities that I didn't really get into in this demo here is that you can actually quantify these things. So these entities can be linked to a specific number. So in that example where we looked at pizzas, maybe somebody wanted to order 2 pizzas. Excuse me, my cat is staring at me, and I'm going to move him out of the way before he knocks out a wire here. All right, there we go. Okay. So in my example, and so in my entities here, and he is back. Toby, please. In my entities here, I'm going to take a look. He says hello too. He's trying to say hello. And the tech interest here is the one I want to look at specifically. So my tech interests are the actual topics for the either docs or samples, or the search term essentially for those docs and samples. So I've put a few tech related terms here. They're pretty much all languages. So Java, Node, Python, Go. I want samples in C# and the like. And these numbers here are the score for when I tested it myself. So, and notice that these entities also are linked to some sort of intent. And the cat is back hiding under my chair here. Oh, Toby, please. You want to sit in my lap or leave? Okay, bye. Okay, so so the entities are yes, the entities entity tech interest is a link to learning, and the way that I do that is by manually setting what these entities are in these intent examples. Oh, this is Toby. This is my cat Toby. Anyway, so if I highlighted learn because I want folks to know that learn means that I want to either see documentation or samples, and I actually create a documentation and sample entity in the entities area here. You probably saw it as well. Same with the languages. So say that I wanted to have PowerShell, which it technically is a tech interest entity. I would just highlight it, hit tech interests, and then I would just go ahead and hit train. So you can see that I have some untrained changes here. So I'm going to go ahead and train it. And it'll take a few seconds here. Toby appreciates that. And I'm going to, if I wanted to test out my model, I could just click test here and say that I said I want to learn about Node. Let's see what happens. So the score is pretty high for Node, actually 99. And if I click inspect here, we'll see that same, almost that same output of data that we saw in the Lewis homepage, where it'll have the entities and also the intent here for me as well. So I'm not going to actually grab the endpoint because I already have it in my example already. But if I wanted to, I could hit publish here, get an endpoint, and then be able to share the endpoint with the key and all that in my application, and then be able to use Lewis. Okay, so let's go to my code here. So this HTTP bot is done, so I'm going to close this up. And I didn't really talk about this too much, but this is just the Bot Framework emulator. And what I really love about it is just really easy to get ready and set with deploying, or not deploying, but testing your bug. You can actually also set up Lewis in here as well. But I didn't do it for this example because I already have it set up in here in my code. So now in this code is going to be a little bit more involved than that simpler bot that I showed you earlier. So one of the first things that you have to do when you want to use Lewis with the bot framework, that's another package. So the Bot Builder AI package is what you're going to grab. And notice that in these constants, I have a bunch of other different things. So the choice factory, component dialog, because I've actually separated out a lot of the logic between the dialog, the bot, and Lewis, because it makes it easier to maintain it all. So so what I have is this main bot, this bot.js file, and actually I took that same HTTP bot and just kind of refit it and refactored it so that it could use Lewis and all of this other stuff. So I'm actually going to just open up the terminal here because we're going to use that in a second. And yeah, let's just walk through this a little bit. So notice that all of these classes, or all these bots, have some sort of class. So if you're familiar with ES6, following through this might be a little easier for you. But this bot extends the activity handler, and that's kind of what helps with things like the conversation flow and also the dialogues, and bringing the dialogues into the bot. And there is this run method here that pretty much will save any like state changes, and will also continue the conversation of in each dialogue. Again, a dialogue is just essentially the conversation exchange back and forth. In the previous bot that I showed, I didn't really have a very linear, or a very linear conversation flow. It kind of was just just loading that function and just checking if the last question was asked. But one very common practice, and one that you'll see in the docs if you go through the bot docs, is that you can actually use something called the waterfall dialog. And what that essentially is, it's a way for you to programmatically list out the steps of your conversation. So what we're looking at here in my content dialog class here is that with this waterfall dialog, I have all these steps. So these steps are telling me, and these steps all are bound to these specific functions. So each of these steps here are functions. So select resource step down here is a prompt asking for language, and then before that, there's a prompt asking for what type of learning resources you want. And in this conversation, I'm giving you some choices. So you can either say docs, samples, or both. And these are just buttons that you can click on and select. And this is a really great way for you to kind of control the conversation. So if you want the user to be able to only select these three choices, so you don't want them to have a free form text, this is a really great way for you to be able to kind of control that and narrow the output or their input down to some specific choices. So the next step after that, and thankfully all of these functions are in order, is asking for the language. So this one is an open prompt, and it's just asking what language did you want. And then after that, then I confirm the choice with a simple yes or no, and I confirm the user's endpoint. So if you want to see, docs or samples in whatever language that you entered, I ask if this is correct. And then we continue on and with Lewis. And Lewis will be the, and this is where we connect with Lewis. Sorry, I'm also reading the chat, making sure that people don't have questions. Okay. So the Lewis recognizer will look for the intent, and with Lewis, the cool thing about Lewis is that all you have to do is send this step context, and that will send the conversation to Lewis, and Lewis will select the entities and the intent of the conversation. So that's what's happening on line 66 here. So after that, I execute the query, and then from there I can also see the result. So this Lewis result, I can find the intent, and there's a little bit more in the SDK that I can do. I can also get the scores and things like that if that's important to me. So if the user, or if Lewis does not recognize that the user's intent is learning, I will just go ahead and send a message and say that this wasn't recognized by the bot, but it'll be added to the search result, because Microsoft Docs and Microsoft Samples, they give you the option to also search for whatever it is you're looking for. And actually, let me just show you what those pages looks like. So let's see, samples. Let's see. So if I searched for, C# here, and I click search, you can see that the search terms actually show up like right here. So I just literally just used this URL and added the search terms at the end. So that's essentially, and that's the same thing for docs. You can kind of search through by docs by text as well. So it doesn't really matter if in this example, if it wasn't recognized by the bot. We're just going to go ahead and add it to your search query, just in case there might be some samples or docs for you there. So then we wait for your reply, and then I send the results, and this is the last step here. So with bots and a few other platforms, there is the idea or the platform of adaptive cards. And this is just a UI-centric way for you to put together any content that you have in a uniform way. I am not a designer. I don't make things pretty very often, but thank goodness for adaptive cards, because I was able to set this up pretty quickly and easily. So essentially, the way that you use adaptive card is you use JSON. And based on the type of content you have here, I just have a text block, and with some text, you could add I think like attachments, images, all kinds of stuff. But here I just have some text and some hyperlinks. And then in this actions array here, this is where I add these two objects here. So this is a sample and the docs, and these are just URLs. So, and I just have, a little if statement here that will add the docs or the samples to the adaptive card based on what the user asked for. Okay, great. So, and the adaptive card is also part of the bot. Let's see, I'm going back up here. The bot builder package. But there also is a standalone package for adaptive cards if you prefer, if you have maybe another application that you are using and you need something super like UI intensive without you having to build it yourself. There is a separate package for NPM package for adaptive cards without having without the bot. Okay, so scrolling to the bottom here is this last part here, end dialogue. And this is just one way for you to, or this is one of a few ways for you to end the conversation of a dialogue. And why, and so you can see this is a lot of code. There's a lot of code, and I could put this in that bot.js file, but the file just gets super huge. And the other part here is that this makes it easy for me and maintainable enough for me to add another dialogue if I wanted. So maybe say that there was another conversation that I wanted to add in my bot here. I could go ahead and do that with another, probably I would most likely do it with another JavaScript file and have that dialogue separate out. Now, if you're wondering, and then also in the last part here with this dialogue, you just have to export it as a module, because in index.js, and I'll show you exactly where all that happens in where is that? Where does it happen? Oh, right. Yes, right here. On lines 11 through 13. This is where I get the bots. I require all the packages or the modules. And then there is a part here where, okay, here we go. So here I configure Lewis and all that. And so with Lewis, you need a few things. You need the app ID, the API key, and the host name, and that's all available when you publish your model in that Lewis, in the Lewis platform, or the Lewis page, or excuse me, the dashboard. That's the word I'm looking for. The dashboard in that Lewis view that I showed you, where I had the intents and entities. Once you test it, and you can publish it, and then you get the endpoint. So anyway, so what I'm doing here is creating the content recognizer, the content recognizer instance, creating the dialogue instance, and then I add them to my bot. And as you can see, I still have this called HTTP bot. As I mentioned before, this is just I just really just upcycled my my previous demo. Okay. Just looking at the chat here, see if there's any questions for me before I continue on. Okay. Awesome. Sweet. No question. All right. Okay, so I think it's time to run through this. Oh, before I continue, This is the content recognizer. Not too much going on here, just making sure that Lewis is configured. Essentially meaning that I have all of the environment variables I need to connect to the endpoint, and then execute Lewis query uses that Lewis package, that bot builder AI package, to recognize or to identify the entities and intents. And then here I extract it. And as you can see, I actually also have some old sample code here too. This was actually this is from in the bot samples. There's one where it asks for your location and your destination for a flight ticketing system, so as a bot. So that is just an old variable that we no longer need, that I forgot to delete. Okay. And again, you can see I also had to export content recognizer as well. Okay, I think it's time to just run this and see what happens. So let's do that. So npm start. All right. So now I'm going to restart my conversation here. And again, here's my hello and welcome to the spot. And now it's asking what learning resources did you want? And here are my choices: docs, samples, or both. So let's go with samples. And now it's going to ask what language am I looking for? And let's say F#. And it said, I want to see samples F#. This is correct. Yes, it is. And here's my link. And if I click on it, oh, interesting. It lost my the pound sign there, or the hashtag there, which kind of makes sense. Probably my was a special character and it probably got chopped off. That's fine. Let's try something else. Let's try another one here. Let's try samples in give me a language. Scala. Maybe there's some Scala stuff. I don't know why I picked 2 functional programming languages in a row, but why not? Let's see what we get. No, nothing like that. There's nothing that, but there's no Scala, but there's probably Java. So let's try it again. Let's do samples, Java. Much better. There we go. Great. So say I wanted both. Let's try. So in Lewis, when I trained my model, all I added were programming languages or scripting languages. So you saw PowerShell, you saw C#, you saw Node in there. But let's say that instead of putting a language, let's say that we selected some other different technical term. Let's see. Let's do I don't know, Visual Studio. Let's type that in. Let's see what we get. Okay. And that's interesting, right? Because before I go to the links here, I actually don't even need to go to links here because it's going to show me the same thing on docs as I did on samples. Are there any MS samples on Visual Studio? I'm actually curious. It's yeah, there's a few, looks like. Cool. Okay. All right. So, like I mentioned here in my code, that Let's go to content recognizer. No, in my dialog here. In my dialog, remember I'm using Lewis to make sure that my top intent is learning. And remember that the learning and the entities, learning and the tech interest entities are kind of working together so that that it knows that my intent is to learn about a specific technology that I enter into my chatbot, right? And in here, and you would assume because of that anything that was not a language, my bot probably will say, well, that intent is probably not learning, so we'll just skip over that. But it looks like it seemed to assume that my top intent was learning, even though that I have an intent for greeting and learning and one called none. So I'm actually going to do one more thing here, and we're going to do another chat conversation here. And let's say we call this language, I don't know, apples. No, apple is too close. Let's call it, I don't know, random word, notes. Okay. And we'll just say yes. And we'll see what Lewis has to say about that. So now I'm gonna go back to Lewis, just gonna refresh because I've had it open for a while. Just looking for questions. No questions. Okay, great. Okay, so if I want to see what has come in from Lewis from my chatbot, I go to my endpoint utterances here, and now I can kind of see what is going on with the input and what Lewis assumed some of these inputs were. So C#. It already knows, it already sees it. This is actually probably an older test that I did. It already highlighted as a tech interest. So I'm gonna say add that, and that'll add that to the examples for my entities. So F# looks like doesn't like the sharp in there. So let's just, I don't know, we'll just go ahead and add that anyway. Maybe we can, maybe I can train it to understand the hashtag in there. ASP.NET, another of my tests, we'll add yes to example. Visual Studio, definitely. Scala, it thought it was some kind of person, but it actually is a type of tech, but I can see if I can fix that later, and we'll go into intents in a second here and see if we can figure that out. So I'll go ahead and add that, and then notes is not really what I was hoping that my was not really my intent. I know learning and notes kind of are kind of terms that go hand in hand, sort of, but not in the case that I'm looking for my model here. So I'd actually just pick as none. And I'd save that. And then I can actually go back into my entities here, and those tech interests that I had in here and these examples, I could also go in here and let's see if I can scroll. There should be a way for me to F#. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, right. Yes. And that person name ended up, oh, I guess it's not in here. Maybe it's in learning. Let's see. Yes. F#. Let's go ahead and set that as tech interests. Great. So we'll Everything else looks good. Oh, right. And Scala was named as a person, but it actually is a tech interest entity. Visual Studio also is a tech interest, so I can go ahead and do that. If I wanted to, ASP.NET, I could do that. Great. And I could train it. And I could test it again if I wanted to. Yeah, and that is essentially it. So now at this point, say that I wanted to deploy my my bot, I could put it in Microsoft Teams. I could do Skype. I can even have like a standalone like web client. I assume, and I would love to try once to like try and make it into a little like extension one of these days. But yeah, that's essentially it for everything that I wanted to cover on bots. So if anybody has any questions, I will spend these last 5 minutes just showing some documentation here. So, so if you go to aka.ms and go intro chatbots, this will take you to the repo where that first bot that I had. This will be this has some information about the bot framework, and also about the demo here. So so there's some links up also at the bottom here if you're interested in learning more. And yeah, so yeah, I guess I'll spend these last few minutes looking for questions or anything like that. And if anybody want to see anything specific on in my code, I'm happy to walk through that too. And while I am waiting for questions, I'm going to charge my iPad that I have here so that it does not die on me while I am making sure no one has any questions. And I do not have my lightning cable here, so I will not be charging my iPad. So I'll just keep my fingers crossed at this 5% here. Yeah. Oh, question. How do you say my handle? Paladik. Yeah, it is a old a handle that I've been using because I'm like I'm a big gamer, so I like to play a lot of like fantasy type games where like I'm like a paladin, so it was kind of like a play on that. That's pretty much it. That, and not a dumb question. I know people ask me a lot. So. Anybody have any other questions? Oh, it's the link is, I'll type it in here, aka.ms, aka.ms slash, where's the slash? Intro row dash chatbots. Chatbots. Oops, link deleted. Huh, interesting. I don't know why that did that. But it's aka.ms intro chatbots. Yes, that like that link, but an S at the end. Thank you. Any more questions? Also, with this repo, it also creates, if you click on this deploy to Azure button here, it'll create the logic app for you. And then from there, you would copy that endpoint and then put it in your environment file. Yeah, and then you can just download the Bot Framework emulator. It's very, very fast install. They're always very fast to update. Always being updated. It's really exciting. And my example here is in JavaScript, but there are in the bot builder samples here. There's a huge repo full of just different samples in .NET, TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, and it goes into even more advanced stuff and scenarios. So definitely check that out. Will the bot eventually learn or to read the pound, or will it be something that has to be hard coded? It'll eventually learn to read it. And I also I already trained the C# one to read it. But I think there's probably some extra maybe thing I have to do to like make sure it does. But I'm pretty sure that it read C# fine. Let's do it again. Let's just double check. We'll do both. What language do you want? If I put C# in here, let's see what happens. Yeah, I think my browser is just cutting off the pound off there. I think it needs whatever the encoded thing for the URL. It has to be that. That's all. So it's nothing. It's just an issue with the browser chopping it off. So it looks like Lewis has already learned it. The bot has learned that that sharp in there is part of the tech term, but the browser's just cutting it off in the URL. And you can see if I kind of click on that, you can see that it's in here, but it gets chopped off in the browser. But yeah, we're at closing here. So thank you all so much for coming to hang out and see me show off some bots. And again, that link is in the chat, aka.ms intro-chatbots. I am Jasmine /Paladik. And yeah, thank you for hanging out with me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.